question has been posed. Was there a robbery? I concede that Fury was largely winning rounds, but what I want to focus on here is the scoring. I believe the British judge was correct in calling the draw. While I'm not exactly sure that I agreed with his methods, I believe the fight was a lot closer than people would like to admit, and I think it could have even favored Wilder. I'll try to explain my reasoning. Here are the scorecards from Saturday. Starting off with Rowan. Rowan is sometimes brought up as a poor scorer, but I've noticed something that I think can be necessary for the scoring of a bout. The Mexican style is something often talked about in boxing. What exactly that means, and how it's relative to boxing, has long been debated. I will call it simply effective aggression. I've outlined it as follows. To be successful with the Mexican style, a fighter must be willing to engage or impose a forward pressure in the fight by standing in range. This means that if you're utilizing the supposed style correctly, you are there to be hit, should the opponent choose to engage you. It may also mean having an effective guard, of which I think Wilder's is underrated. It could also mean the fighter throwing more punches may be favored, unless he's outlanded by a fair margin, or significantly countered, as he's initiating the act of boxing, lest both fighters become idle. This means your work rate can be higher, even if your punch percentage is lower. If you look at the punch stats, Wilder was almost always throwing more punches during the fight. How many times have we heard in boxing, to be first and third? Many fans are inclined to say, well, that's boxing. They lost. He landed 3 more punches in that round. For a statement like that to be true, for everything that boxing is, it seems terribly one-dimensional. One cannot be blinded by a punch count, nor should they necessarily be swayed. While I agreed in giving Wilder some early rounds, I'm not confident that he won the first 4 rounds as awarded by Rowan. But I would give him round 1, possibly the second or third, with some rounds near even, and Fury starting to take the rounds near the middle of the fight. As far as what Rowan could have seen in giving the rounds to Wilder, it goes back to the Mexican style. You could have felt Wilder was pushing the pace, thereby initiating the boxing match. But I feel if you're pushing the pace and you don't start to hurt or damage your opponent, it may begin to go in the opponent's favor, as you can see from rounds 5 onward. If you look to Robert Tapper's scorecard, he seems to be in line with the typical fan, which seems to generally score by shots landed per round and punch percentages, boxing as they call it, or perhaps more technical boxing. On to Phil Edwards, the British judge. He gives Wilder 1, 6, and 7, in addition to the 2 knockdowns he scored. While I think this judgment was fair, I believe a lot of the rounds could have been called even. In rounds when no boxer gains the point advantage, the knockdown is even more devastating. It's like rounds are removed from the fight. If you're not winning rounds cleanly, you may never overcome a knockdown in an even fight. Which goes back to what I said about the fight possibly favoring Wilder. Imagine there were 3 even rounds, with 2 rounds being called for Wilder, outside of the 10-8 rounds, with Fury taking the rest. That's 5 rounds to 3. The figure I'd come to there is 114, 115 Wilder. Now, I'm not saying that Wilder won the fight. It was called at a draw. But what I'm trying to express is that a judge's calculation may vary. There's a chance that you could support Wilder. When a fight's this close, one may call it a robbery either way, so I believe a draw, or even favoring the more damaging or aggressive fighter, would be reasonable. My final point to those who claim this was a robbery. Looking at the cards, there was no judge that didn't give Wilder at least 2 rounds, outside of 9 or 12, and 2 of the judges gave him 3 rounds. So if you give him 3 rounds, plus 4 points from the knockdowns, that's 7 rounds apiece. No even rounds were scored, though I believe they could have been. As you may see, the judges' cards can be different for a number of reasons, but the 10-8s awarded for knockdowns persist. Finally, I prepared a sample scorecard for those who still may not see the logic behind a Wilder draw or a victory for Wilder. I have 2 examples of what I think could have been a reasonable assessment of the fight. On the left, I've given 3 even rounds, and 2 for Wilder, outside of the 9th and 12th, just as the judges had agreed unanimously. You'll notice that the knockdowns, or even damaging your opponent, may become the deciding factor if a fight has a chance of being judged even. It seems obvious that the UK has already scored it as 10-2, regardless of their judge or any of the other judges, so I won't go into Fury's path to victory. He mostly did what he needed to do to win rounds and avoid damage until the knockdowns, and I think that's the story of the fight. Watching the round totals, on the left you see an aggressive start from Wilder, which was neutralized by Fury over time into round 8, with Fury taking a point advantage before Wilder was able to knock him down in round 9. Fury then went on to win the next 2 rounds until being dropped and almost stopped in the 12th. On the right side, I've given Wilder 2 rounds and scored 2 rounds even, in addition to the knockdowns in 9 and 12. The result is a draw. Watching the round totals here, it starts slowly, but shows Fury gaining a lead into the round of 6, while maintaining his lead until round 9, where he was knocked down and the fight became even again. Fury went on to win rounds 10 and 11, before being knocked down again in the 12th, making it 14-14. I'm sure plenty of people will still argue, but I'm sorry. I can't say that I see a robbery here.